Good morning. Welcome to monastery in quite early hours of Sunday morning. Um, don't know when we'll get it posted, but it's quite early now. We'll not begin matins for another couple of hours. I wanted to talk a little bit about religious freedom because one hears a lot of outcries about disappearing religious freedom or not having sufficient religious freedom for various reasons. The Islamic community in parts of Canada, for example, have been asked for and sometimes received to have an imam come to a school. And of course, places for them to do the purification rituals before the prayers. And a lot of allowances being made for Islamic students that aren't necessarily made for the students of other religions. And this brings us to the problem about the concerns with religious freedom. And we have various groups that are getting together, banding together, demanding more religious freedom. Sometimes when we study what they mean by religious freedom, though, it's very disturbing. What some of them ultimately mean by religious freedom is freedom to persecute somebody else. The other thing about religious freedom is that when we demand the government legislate certain religious freedoms, beyond what we normally have, the right to come together, to worship, to practice our religion, and to teach our religion to our children. These are normal, ordinary human rights, and certainly guaranteed by the Canadian Charter. But when we go beyond that, we come into all kinds of difficulties. It's really out of order that Islamic students should have these extra rights that others don't have. For example, can a rabbi come into a school and teach to a public school? Jews also have certain rights of purification. Is there anything being made that allows that? Can Jehovah's Witnesses have their preacher come in to the school if there are, say, 10 Jehovah's Witness children in the school? Can Mormons come in, Mormon missionaries come into the school and speak? Can Mormons, Baptists, Orthodox, whatever, can any of us, can we all bring our various ministers into the school and teach? And how would we contradict each other while we were teaching in the school? Would only those who belong to our particular religion have to come to listen to us or gather with us if they wanted to? Or would we have an assembly of some kind? These are all questions that arise from the idea of religious freedom. When we think back that, yes, religious people have lost some of our freedoms over the years. We can't burn witches at stake anymore. Once upon a time we could, and the government would back us up, of course. We can't burn heretics at stake or exile them to the Far East or to Siberia or drive them out of the country, like as the Protestant movement drove the Anabaptists out. It's ironic, I think, that the Mennonites found religion. The only country in Europe they could find religious freedom in was Orthodox Russia, where they could set up their farms and actually thrive. They were being persecuted because of the religious freedom of other religions. The other religions didn't want to extend that religious freedom to them. So this is really one of the problems about the quest for defense of religious freedoms and this sort of thing is, whose religious freedoms? And are we going to defend the rights of the religious freedoms of people who don't want religion, don't have religion? Do atheists have rights? I notice that we now have a Wiccan chaplain in some prisons because some of the prisoners practice witchcraft or Wiccans. So that's religious freedom, of course. Witchcraft is a religion. Wiccan is a religion. So we have to grant full rights to them. If Islamic imams are going to come in and teach in the school, everybody has to have the same right. You can't give that right to just one religion. In the military, of course, we can have Wiccan chaplains as well as in the prisons. Can we have Wiccans going into the school and teaching witchcraft? But it's a religion, you see. So if we're going to demand all of these religious freedoms, it has to extend to everyone. Now, it seems the world has become terrified of Islam, so they're going to bestow more rights there. But that isn't even really the issue. The issue is that we have associations or societies for the advancement of religious freedom or defense of religious freedom. Well, we'd like to know exactly what that means. Because does it mean that you can go out in public and preach against other people or other groups of people? We obviously do have religious freedom. Jehovah's Witnesses are still to be found on the street corner passing out their magazines. Christians can do, Baptists can do that. Orthodox Christians can do that. You can all go stand on the street corner and pass out listki or broshurki or something, and nobody's going to stop you. That freedom is there. It's there to be used. It's there to be taken advantage of. Nobody can stop you from doing that in Canada. You cannot go into a public park and start preaching and holding a religious rally, because that's not why people come to a public park. They come there for the peaceful enjoyment of public space. Obviously, it would be completely out of order to allow itinerant preachers to go set up shop there and start preaching. And what would you have if you did? Well, you'd have Christians who violently disagreed with each other, perhaps preaching on opposite sides of a pathway or road. You'd have to have, of course, imams would have to be there preaching, and you'd have to allow Wiccans to come there and preach also, because Wiccan is a religion. You'd have to allow Druids. We have actually an order of Druids in Canada, and we have some people who have that as their religion. So when people are talking about religious freedom, our first question is, what boundaries are you going to set on that? Is it going to extend to literally every religion in Canada or America? Or are you going to try to restrict it to just certain religions? Are you going to try to restrict it to the three religions of the book? After all, Zoroastrians were monotheists and had a book long before there were Jews, Christians, or Islam. And Hindus have more than one book. They have a bunch of books. So how are we going to limit this? What are the boundaries going to be? And who are we going to deprive of religious freedom so that we feel we have more religious freedom? What groups do we want to be free to attack or try to harm? All of these are questions that need to be raised and addressed very firmly when you have talk about religious freedom. So we can't just throw this word out. See, in Canada and America both, since 9/11, we've all lost some freedoms. And I think we've been a little bit too passive about it. I know a group of us here in Canada, when the National Defense Act came in under the Chrétien government following 9/11, quite a group of us, including myself. In fact, I volunteered to be the first person to be imprisoned for violating it, because there was no sunset clause on it. The sunset clause means that it lasts for a certain period of time, then comes to an end. Well, when you permanently put a National Defense Act or a Patriot Act down in the States into effect with no sunset clause, it's never going to end. It's sort of like the temporary tax. Income tax was a temporary tax to help finance the First World War. It was supposed to come to an end at the end of the First World War. Didn't have a sunset clause on it, though. And you never, ever found a government that rescinds a tax. If anything, they find a way to extend a tax. things like the National Defense Act, though, and these other acts, National Defense Act's been replaced by something else now. We've all lost freedoms that we shouldn't have lost. And we see the government trying to, in both countries, trying to impinge yet further on those freedoms by wiretapping people's internet and things like this. But now we talk about religious freedoms. Okay, if we want to have a dialogue about religious freedoms, everyone who wants to make a representation for religious freedoms needs to set out the boundaries to that, how it's going to be all-inclusive of all religions without excluding any religion, and how we're going to prevent any religion from persecuting, condemning, slandering, or speaking against any other group. Are we going to have then religions involved very deeply in politics? Is the United Church going to come out and start preaching that we must vote for the Liberal Party or the New Democratic Party, more likely? And the Southern Baptist, well, we do have Baptists in Canada. And are they going to start preaching that we must vote Conservative or you're not a Christian? We have to look at this very carefully and remember that part of the reason for the general collapse of the Roman Catholic Church in Quebec, why so many churches in Quebec stand empty permanently, why the low actual membership in the Roman Catholic Church and attending of the church in Quebec, because the Roman Catholic Church meddled so much in the politics of the province that during the Quiet Revolution, the Catholic Church lost its influence altogether and its power in Quebec. And Quebec became the most liberal, the most, if you pardon the expression, I think it's not a useful expression, but the most left-wing of the provinces in Canada. Because of the over-presence of the church, which meddled and interfered in the politics of the province. And the end result, of course, is that the church has to lose its authority altogether. So what kind of a knockdown, drag-out are we looking at when we talk about religious freedom? I'm going to repeat it again. If you are arguing that there's not enough religious freedom or that religious freedom is being curtailed and you want more religious freedom, then first of all, make it very clear what you consider to be the boundaries of religious freedom, how you include to make religious freedoms all-inclusive of all religions in the country, bar none. And to what degree do you then intend to try to bully the politicians into favoring your religion over some other religion, your religious doctrines over the religious doctrines of other people? And how will you keep from infringing on the rights of atheists? How can you not infringe on the rights of Islam and Israel if you're preaching that Jesus Christ is God? How will you not infringe on the rights of the Jews if you publicly preach that Jesus Christ is the Messiah, by which are saying the Jews are false and apostate because they don't accept Jesus, because the Messiah is the Jewish ultimate manifestation. So are we going to preach against witchcraft? All Wiccans, of course, are religion and they can preach for the religion. Are we going to preach against Islam because say that after all Jews and Muslims are going to hell because they don't acknowledge Jesus Christ as their own personal savior? But every other religion is too. Buddhists are all going to hell. Sikhs are all going to hell. Hindus are all going to hell. Atheists are, of course, all going to hell. How publicly can we preach that and not be infringing on depriving other religions of their rights to the peaceful enjoyment of their religion, to the peaceful fulfillment of their own religion? So these are things that need to be spelled out clearly. Do we want to have the right to burn witches again? Do we want to have the right to exile heretics to the Great Oasis? What precisely is it that we want rights to do? How is our right to gather in our own churches or temples and worship and teach our children our religion, how has that been infringed? How have we impinged on that? Look, we all have the right to go out and march and protest against abortion. Everybody can do that who wants to. So what else do you want without impinging on somebody else's rights to the enjoyment of their and fulfillment of their religion, or without persecuting some other group or encouraging bullying? This is, all these things, they must be spelled out if you want to be taken seriously about the infringement of your religious rights. Make a list of those infringements, which rights of yours are being curtailed or infringed. How are all of these equal rights to be extended to every religion in the country, bar none? How are you going to keep from infringing on somebody else's religious rights and peaceful practice of their religion while exerting your rights? And to what degree do you intend to become engaged in partisan politics with your, that's the whole thing. Now, I don't mean special thing. Of course, we protest against abortion. We try to lobby our politicians about it, that sort of thing. But to what degree are we going to try to get other, major doctrines of our faith put into law? To what degree are we going to try to convince the government to help us persecute somebody else? Make a list of all these things. Write a little brochure about it, a little brochure or booklet about it, and let people see what your agenda really is, what it is you're really after, what you really want. But tell the truth. Ultra-right-wing Christians think it's a virtue to lie when they're trying to defend or advance their agenda. And they certainly do it. And one can point it out, one can demonstrate it. So don't lie, just tell the truth. What is it you want in the way of religious freedom that we don't already have in Canada? How is the Canadian culture, the Canadian society, the Canadian people, the Canadian government infringing on your religious liberties? And then everybody knows what you want. They can choose which ones to support, which ones not to support. But remember, every right that you have, every other religion in the country also has. And if a right's been extended to another religious group, such as Islam, and you don't have that right, then of course you have a real cause. That right that's given to one group must be extended to every group. And you cannot demand your rights at the expense of the rights of any other people or the peaceful enjoyment of life of any other Canadian citizen. So spell it out. Spell it out so people can see what your agenda is. Some people will join it. Others will resist it. But they have the right to do so. So that's one thing I want to say about these movements for religious rights or infringement of religious rights. Say what you mean or don't say anything at all. And don't try to impose limitations on the rights of others for the sake of your perceived rights. None of us have the right to deprive other citizens of their rights.